kitchen and the dining room and the sunroom and the living room are all arranged in a sort of circle, from the chair directly in front of the door, blocking it from opening. The reason they do this is because the way that the door swings open, if someone were to open it, the door would hit their expensive sound equipment for their TV. This door is not used regularly and has not been used since I met her. In fact, they had recently put a treadmill in the sunroom that totally blocks the door from being used. What I'm trying to say is that that's how infrequently this door is used. Anyway, I walked into the house that night and was greeted by the dogs. Okay, I guess the gate is opened again. Awesome. Except this time, the gate was opened, and so was the door to the living room. The armchair that blocks the door had been pushed out of the way too, and the door itself was unlocked. The key is left in the lock usually, and the door was just flung wide open. Now, while I do believe in the paranormal, I am naturally a pretty massive skeptic. I really don't believe any of the stories that I read online or any of the things that I see on TV. But at this point, I am terrified of my friend's parents' house. I know it hasn't been anything really bad, but I just don't want to be alone when that weird stuff is going on. Even if the door was somehow just accidentally unlocked, unlikely mind you, but since I didn't personally check, who knows? I can't think of a rational explanation for how that chair moved. And I also don't have an explanation for the dog being shut in the one room, especially the second time it happened, when I know that I personally double-checked the door and that I can't pet sit for them anymore. I just don't want to be in that house alone anymore. Anyway, I finished the pet sitting many days ago, and I went back a handful of times with either my sister or my best friend, never alone, mind you. And the times I went to check on the dogs with someone else, there was nothing weird. But I'm currently in the talks with them about setting up a camera, so I'll keep you updated if there's anything further. This happened a few years ago when I was around 20 or so, I'd say. I was hanging out with my buddy Matt in my apartment, located in the downtown area of a medium-sized Midwestern city. We were drinking whiskey, watching comedies, playing tunes, etc. He mentions that he has a close friend, Emily, who used to live in my apartment building with her mother, and she now apparently lives across the street from me, and he thought it would be a really good idea if we met because apparently we're very similar and I was single and ready to mingle at that point in my life, so why not? So he rings her cell and tells her to come by my place. She arrived at my apartment and I instantly became fond of her. She was hilarious, was very pretty, and a musician just like me. She was around 30, so 10 years older than me. My friend Matt was 35. I've always had friends that are much older for some reason, and we played songs together and laughed hysterically for hours. Matt decided to go home, leaving us two alone, and we chilled for a while longer, ended up making out, and got all of her contact info before she told me that she was going home and that we should meet up soon. Over the next few weeks, we develop a strong relationship and we hang out almost daily. I would throw some pajamas on and just walk across the street and we'd get wasted and watch movies together. Quite honestly, it was just really awesome. After arriving home from my 10-day trip to New York City, things got really weird though. The day that I returned, she asked if she could come over, so I unpacked all my stuff and then told her to stop by. She rings the buzzer, takes the elevator 7 floors up to my apartment, and lets herself in. I was talking non-stop about all of the awesome things I did and the people I met in New York City, and I could just immediately tell that she didn't want to hear any of it. She would change the subject every time I brought it up, and eventually she just said, "Can you stop talking about New York? I really don't give a fuck." I was surprised to hear her speak like this. The Emily that I'd been getting to know was not like that. She was caring and passionate and just an amazing person. Or so I thought. Fast forward to a few nights later, and I had just gotten home from working a 12-hour shift, and I collapsed in bed, ready to pass out for the night. It's about 9 p.m, and I get a text from Emily that says, "Hey, what's up?" I don't feel much like replying at that moment, because honestly, I'm just too exhausted, and our last hangout was just too weird for me to comprehend, so I'm still trying to decide how to deal with that. So I plug my phone into charge and turn off the lights and just fall asleep pretty effortlessly. But then I wake up to somebody pounding on my door and screaming at the top of their lungs, "Open the fucking door, let me in now." My entire apartment reeks like cigarette smoke, and I grab my phone from beside my bed, my heart beating 1,000,000 miles per hour, 27 missed phone calls, a bunch of text messages, all from Emily, and I scan through the text while she's still at the door screaming, trying to break down my door. The most recent text from her is a long one claiming that I'm a piece of shit for not responding to a text earlier, and that she's coming over to beat the shit out of me for not doing so. She had a key to the building still, from when she used to live there. So I get out of bed, nearly having a panic attack and trying to decide what my next move should be. Should I open the door to calm her down? Should I call the police? Should I just ignore her? I decide to open the door though, and she begins wailing on me, swinging her arms, trying to hit me. She was smoking a cigarette, and there were 3 cigarette butts on the ground next to her. Smoking indoors was prohibited in my apartment building. She was very obviously on some sort of drug though. She just kept screaming at me, telling me how awful I am for not responding to her text messages.
Are you allowed to smoke out there, or is it still prohibited?
I was somehow able to calm her down, and I took her to the roof of the apartment building, which had a pretty nice enclosed picnic table area. We sat beside one another, and she was quiet now, finally. She kept asking me how I could be such an asshole and that I need to explain myself. And the look
if I was you, I would get the
was
fuck
just
out there.
pure evil as she spoke to me in this calm
Dump that
demeanor.
bitch and just get away.
I said to her,
And block
"Emily, I don't ever want to speak to you again after tonight.
Good idea.
This whole scenario is absolutely insane. You need help. Let me walk you home."
I wouldn't even
I take her
tell her
home
that.
and I return
Or
to my
just walk
apartment
away,
to
but
attempt
help
sleeping
pay.
again, at which I
And
don't
block
succeed this
an
time.
umbar, you know.
A couple of days later, I return home from work and there's an envelope taped to my door. I open it and it's a handwritten letter from Emily apologizing and saying that I'm a beautiful human who doesn't deserve an evil person like her in their life. There was a candy bar attached to the envelope too, one that
I would not eat
I'd
it.
never heard of, that she always told me that I needed to try. I never spoke to her again after this, but from what Matt tells me, which, by the way, he always knew that she was a problematic person, she's a heavy user of crack now and is working as a food runner in a restaurant nearby. Needless to say, I did not try that candy bar.
Good. Smart idea.
I worked at a local government agency for a long time. Each summer, we would get a new crop of interns too. Most of them were fine, but some caused issues, like when we caught 2 of them actually making out in the file room. But overall, they were just normal kids from high school or college just trying to get some work experience. In 2016, my department received an intern later than usual, though, right in the middle of the summer. Warner was a bit older than the usual crowd, around my age, maybe late 20s. We initially hit it off pretty well, and although I found him sort of strange, I didn't mind since he was friendly and we had some common interests. He was the only person in my department who was even close to my age too, so that was kind of nice. But the interns were all teenagers, and the regular staff averaged around 60, older than my mum. So I was pretty psyched to have a peer to chat with. So occasionally, I would eat lunch with Warner or stop to talk at his cubicle and whatnot. His strangeness was mostly an outsized personality, a mix of over-the-top enthusiasm with a bit of social awkwardness. I got 0 bad vibes from the guy, if I'm being honest. But it wasn't long before Warner started having major performance problems at work. He would produce little to no work on most days, no show or arrive late without informing anyone, and generally just acted unprofessionally. One day, He showed up for work at 3:15 p.m. when our workday ended at 4:30. The office manager was livid and told him to just go home. His behaviour bothered nearly everyone in my office too, but I didn't supervise him, and we had plenty of slacker interns in the past. While his antics were a bit of a spectacle, it wasn't a big deal to me. Now, if you're wondering why he wasn't let go, 2 words: political favour. He was hired because his uncle donated to the campaign of our big boss. In other words, he wasn't going anywhere. And near the end of that summer, though, I put in my notice that I was leaving my job and relocating to a new state. Once Warner caught wind of this, he would constantly complain that it sucked that I was leaving because we barely had time to become friends. I would always laugh lightly in response and give him a sympathetic yeah, but he would start to monopolize my time at work more and more, and it became disruptive to the people who sat near me, in fact. I found it slightly annoying, but I also was extremely happy to be leaving that job for reasons unrelated to Warner, and I spent my last month there not caring much about my co-workers and what they thought. So I tolerated him lingering by my desk. One day, though, he caught me leaving work and offered me a ride home.
And smoke.
I usually took the bus, and occasionally other co-workers would offer me rides home if they were going my way, so
keep
this didn't seem odd to me.
Keep a cup on the
I accepted and walked to his car with him. And man, it smelled awful and it was just full of garbage. He hastily cleared off the passenger seat and apologised, and we got on our way. But once we were on the main road, he started begging me to stop and get dinner with him. I laughed and said that he didn't need to ask me that insistently, and said that we could stop at a diner on the way. We had a nice meal with pleasant conversation, and he was intelligent and had a variety of interests. Our political positions aligned, and we shared disdain for our cranky old co-workers. Quite honestly, I had a good time. I expressed, too, that he didn't need to drive me all the way home now that it was getting late, but he kept insisting, so I just relented in the end. As I directed him toward my house, he started in again with the whining about how our developing friendship was cut short because I was moving. At this point, I was tired of hearing this, and the decision to leave my job and move away from home was extremely difficult to make anyway, and I was proud of how bold I was being. I stopped responding and laughing, and his whining faded out. We came up to the turn to get onto my street, and when I pointed it out, he accelerated and drove right past it, laughing. I laughed in a "what the hell are you doing" kind of way, thinking that he was just joking around. When I began giving directions about how to turn around and get back, he started begging me to keep. This immediately set me on high alert. It suddenly hit me that I'm in a man's car, someone that I don't know that well, who doesn't exercise proper behaviour at work, which is the only context I know him. And now he's displaying really weird behaviour outside of work as well. My instinct was to not insist I be let out of his car. I felt as if this would escalate the situation into something negative, and in hindsight, it may have been the right thing to do when I think about the type of person he turned out to be. So I told him that we could hang out at the park near my house if he wanted to talk sometime. He seemed to like that idea, and we parked and walked over. The pleasant conversations resumed, and beside the weird clinginess, he was perfectly fine to talk to. Until he dumped his entire life story on me, including his prior arrest for theft, his heroin addiction, and related struggles with depression. I tried to be sympathetic, but I was very put off by this. It was a lot of highly personal information all at once, and I was still on alert because of his prior behaviour, mind you. I tried changing the subject by showing him pics of my dog. I scrolled one pic too far, and the next one was a photo of me wearing makeup and posing cutely, way differently than the slob I was at work. He grabbed the phone and went, "Wow, you're very photogenic." I felt awkward and didn't say anything. There was a long silence, and then he launched into a weird tangent about how compatible we are and that we have similar interests, etc., etc., and that he wishes I wasn't moving so that we could try hanging out again, but on a date this time. I didn't say anything, and he broke the silence with, "Sorry, I'm saying all of this stuff. I'm actually high right now. That's why I know where Riverside, bad neighborhood that had previously come up in conversation, is, and I went there yesterday to buy. Otherwise, I wouldn't have said it, and I'm really sorry." Internally, I freaked out at this. He had definitely put his drug addiction in the past tense, and I assumed that it was something he was recovering from, not currently using. I also realized that I had been in a car that he was operating while he was under the influence.
So smoke.
He immediately started whining and begging me not to judge him or hate him, and just kept saying over and over again how nice I am and how understanding I am, that I'm pretty and smart. All of these weird compliments interspersed with talking down about himself. I didn't know what to do, so I just smiled reassuringly and told him not to worry, but that I was tired and I needed to go home. And that's when he started crying. He had this really weird, wheezy sob too, but no tears were coming out. I sat there silently while he did this, trying to come up with some sort of graceful escape plan. But my patience was wearing thin at this point, and my anxiety was through the roof. It's a weird feeling to be annoyed and panicky at the same time, so I stood up and apologized, said the park was close to my house, so I'll walk, and started to leave when I remembered that I left all of my stuff in his car. Trying a new approach, I casually mentioned that I forgot my stuff in his car and joked that if he wanted my dirty lunch containers, he could keep them. He ceased his bizarre crying and stood up and ran over to his car to unlock it, and I grabbed my stuff out of the back seat. His demeanor changed drastically as he calmly apologized for making things weird and asked if he could drop me off at home so I didn't have to walk alone at night. I said yes in the end, but made him drop me off a block over from my little side street so that he wouldn't see which house was mine. Now, I could end it there, but what bothered me the most about this guy happened after this encounter, and I'll try to make this part short. So, a week or two after that weird evening at the end of August by this point, I had my last day at the job and moved 1,000 miles across the country. Warner would sometimes text me with long ramblings detailing his feelings about himself and about our missed opportunity, and I didn't respond to these messages. But now that I wasn't near him, I didn't feel the need to placate. The text stopped after a few weeks, and quite honestly, I just forgot about him. Fast forward to February, and I get a text from a former co-worker. Her message said, "Sorry you had to hear about it this way," and her text message was a link to a local news article titled, "Man Dies from Wounds in Riverside Stabbing on Wednesday." Because of the way she worded it, I thought Warner was the victim, but when I read the article, it included his mugshot and the charges. Apparently, he was the attacker and he actually murdered someone. I felt so shocked and disgusted that I couldn't believe I knew someone who killed another human. Later on, I called an old co-worker for some details. Apparently, shortly after I left the job, he was fired for trashing the men's bathroom. Just threw around anything that he could lift and poured all the soap out and smeared it all over the place. He then apparently lost his apartment too. Presumably some of the articles about the stabbing describe Warner as a homeless man. I have to assume that that's how he ended up in the aforementioned Riverside. But there are a lot of homeless drug addicts who squat in abandoned houses there. At the time, I wondered if the man he'd stabbed had refused to give him something that he wanted, and that is how he reacted to a hard no. I don't think I made all the wisest decisions during my interactions with Warner, but man, I'm glad I was able to avoid setting him off like that, since he was clearly not stable at all. Hands down, that was the worst intern I ever encountered. So this was about 3 years ago on a dark stretch of road near a main intersection in a a major Bay Area city. I worked at a big name, healthy grocery store from 2014 to 2017. I was lucky to meet and work with amazing...
Ready? Yeah. Cool. Let's do this shit. Let's do this. For your hair. Alright, it's the next day, as you can tell. Press play, have fun for a day.
Too. This park in particular seemed to have many rumours that it was an old burial ground, but I think that was bullcrap and just something that dumb white kids like to tell each other during sleepovers. Anyway, the park is made up of cleared hills with a small paved path kind of meandering through it. If you follow the path all the way back, you have the option to stay on the pavement and return to the beginning, or go off onto a separate unpaved path with a small forest. We, having felt like we hadn't burned enough calories yet, decided to keep walking deeper into the forest. After walking for about 5 minutes, I'd say, we came to a small clearing that had 6 distinct paths branching off. The clearing had a sign claiming that all the paths loop back around and a few facts about the park. We decided to go through one and that we'd see how we felt once we got back to the clearing. When we had gotten back, we decided that we were probably sweaty enough and that we should just return back home to make lunch. We had gone back down the path that we were sure leads to the front of the park, all the while talking about stupid stuff that the two of us had gotten up to in the past few days. After walking a little bit, we joked that it always feels longer after you decide that you want to go home. And then, seemingly almost like magic, the path that we went down had led us back to the clearing. We looked at each other, both saying that it was a bit weird, and then just kind of laughed it off as us not being the most trustworthy at directions. We decided to make sure this time that the path that we went down was the same path the sign was facing, seeing as it greeted us when we first got to the clearing. I was sure that we had done that the first time around, but wasn't 100%. However, when we did that, it had led us back around again to the same clearing. We decided to go down a different path at this stage, the one directly to the right of the path that we had taken before. And maybe we just didn't realize that the sign wasn't directly in front of the right path. We were led straight back to the clearing again. It was at this point that we decided to make a system, and to always go right off the path that we had taken before so that we didn't lose track. I remember us making jokes about how it would be the two of us to die in the woods that is only a mile away from civilization, or how the Blair Witch was probably mad at us and that if we saw a pile of rocks, not to mess with them. We were very light-hearted through this entire thing, but in the back of my mind, something just wasn't right. The more and more that we walked too, the more it felt like someone was watching us. I couldn't express it to my sister for fear of her making fun of me, or worse, saying that she felt the same way. And it wasn't the type of watching as though we were being hunted or stalked. It was like whatever was watching us was finding humour in our being lost. It wasn't outright threatening, but it definitely was a very uneasy feeling. And when we made it to the 6th and final path, we laughed at our luck at it being the last path to choose. When we talked about maybe going swimming later on, we were both now quite sweaty. However, when the path ended, it didn't take us out to the front of the park. It was the same exact clearing that we'd been stuck in for the past few hours now. I didn't know what to think at this point. Maybe our system was flawed and we had to think of a new way to make sure that we weren't taking the same paths over and over. As we both stood there in silence, partially from being dumbfounded and partially from being out of breath, I swear to you that I heard something chuckle behind us in the trees. It could have been my imagination, I admit, or it could have even been an animal, but all I remember is saying, "Right, screw this," and making a beeline into the woods. My sister started following me and asked me what I was doing. I explained that if we just walked straight and didn't turn at all the paths like we did before, that we would make it out somehow. She agreed and didn't seem to object at trampling through the high grass and the thorns and trees, which made me feel like she had felt strange about the situation too. When we finally saw a break in the trees, we both sighed in relief. We walked straight out of the woods and into the backyard of somebody else's house in a nearby housing development. We walked around the front and saw an older lady sitting on her front porch, drinking some lemonade or something. She asked us where we had come from, and we just said that we got lost in the woods, and asked where exactly we were. She didn't seem shocked in the slightest, too, and she said, yeah, those woods will do that to you. She offered us some lemonade and a ride back to our car. Well, we took the lemonade, but decided to walk back to the car, and we were a long bit away at this point, but we decided that we'd be fine as long as we stuck to the roads. I remember telling my mum about it right after it happened. She said that we weren't the outdoorsy type, so no one really believes me when I say how creeped out I was, and how that feeling disappeared too as soon as we left those woods. All I know is that whatever was in those woods wasn't happy that my sister and I were there, and I won't be going back to see if it ever happens again. These events took place in the spring of 2014. My friends Sarah and Trisha had finally agreed to come camping with me. The problem was that none of us were experienced in surviving in the wilderness, but that didn't stop us. We packed our gear, loaded up on food, alcohol, and made our way to our location. When we arrived at
Well, I guess I'll see ya a month later, a week later. Who the fuck knows? But I'll see ya whenever the fuck I see ya. Bye for now, yo. I'll be chilling here, head to the house, head to bed, chill here, head to bed, rag school. Actually, no, going to school until you come back. Then I'll rag school, because why not rag school? You know what I mean? Why not reward myself when you guys come back? So I'll see ya whenever the fuck I see you, I guess. Month later, a year later, who the fuck knows? I'll see you whenever. Bye for now.